quilting friends, it's Carolina Moore, your favorite sewing and quilting YouTuber, and today we're going to talk about something that I don't normally talk about here. Normally I'm sharing projects and fun with you, and today I'm going to answer a question that I hear asked a lot, usually kind of quietly, so we're going to talk about it out loud, and that is, where does the money go in the quilting industry? When you buy a pattern or a notion, why are you spending the amount of dollars that you are? Where does that money go? What is happening with your dollars, right? Because you were spending your dollars, let's talk about where they're going. Now, if this isn't a topic that you're interested in, you'd rather not know about the behind the scenes of the quilting industry, that's totally fine. But for those of you who are staying, I'm going to show you what that looks like in terms of something that we all in the quilting industry understand, and that is a 12-inch finished quilt block. Now, our finished block is not going to look like this, but we're going to start out here. Ready? Let's get started. Okay, so this is our 12-inch finished quilt block, and as you can see, it's just a single piece of fabric, right? And this represents what a lot of people think when they are paying for a pattern or a notion, that 100% of those dollars are going straight to the pattern designer, which we would love if it was true, right? If 100% of every single dollar that you spent went straight to the pattern designer or the notion designer. I mean, as a pattern designer and notion designer, that sounds great. It's honestly not what I want, and we're going to talk about why, but that sounds great, right? However, that's not the case. A lot of those dollars actually don't end up as pattern designer or notion designer dollars. We're going to start off by saying often most patterns are sold in quilt shops, right? So this would be the dollars that go to the quilt shop and the dollars that go to the quilt pattern designer to start off with. Going to make some more adjustments to this. Now some people are going to say, wow, that feels like an imbalance. It's not. I'm not upset about this at all. As a quilt pattern designer who just saw my block go from this to this, this is part of the industry. This is how it works. We are totally okay with this. We're going to talk about why it looks like this in a second. It's going to make more sense. All right. So that makes sense, right? You buy a pattern from a quilt shop gets some of the dollars, pattern designer gets some of the dollars. But there's often another piece in this equation, in this case literally another piece of fabric, and that is this one right here. So this is our quilt shop, this is our distributor, and this is our pattern designer, and now we have three pieces of fabric that are going to represent how this quilt block is divided up, how our quilt block of dollars are divided up to make up the different pieces of where your money goes. Now, if we're looking at this original piece that I have right here, if the quilt pattern designer were to get all of the dollars, they're not actually getting all of these dollars. That makes sense as well, right? Because as a quilt pattern designer, we have the cost of printing the pattern, right? So we'll have part of it that's taken off because we are printing the pattern. We also have the cost of the actual design, so this could be the cost of the fabric, the cost of long arming, our time for making the pattern, and that's going to break down how much the designer actually gets, even if we were to assume that the designer gets all of the dollars, right? These amounts can vary depending. I know that a $12 pattern, depending on how it's made and how many are sold, can cost a designer more than the pattern cost if they don't sell a lot. This cost right here of making the pattern, of having a website to host the pattern, this cost will be a bigger or smaller part of the whole block depending on how many you sell. I only have to make the quilt on the cover once, and if I sell 1,000 of those patterns versus 8 of those patterns is not going to cover the cost of making that cover quilt, but 1,000 definitely will in just about any case. Same with the printing. To print 100 copies of a pattern versus printing 5,000 copies of a pattern, it's less per pattern for printing when you get to make more. So these pieces can actually be more or less. Now I know some of y'all are saying, Caroline, there's not a lot of contrast between the 3 fabrics that you chose to represent the pattern designer's cut. And that's because sometimes you can't tell the difference from, actually most people will not be able to tell the difference of what part of the pattern designer's cut, we're going to call it, literally cut, what part of the pattern designer's cut is going to the different parts. You don't really see that and you don't know. And as pattern designers, we generally don't talk about that because it's rude to talk about money. We don't talk about money, but I'm doing it today. Okay, so here's our most common scenario where we have the quilt shop, where we have the distributor, and where we have the pattern designer. Now you're going to say, Caroline, you're missing those extra strips on the pattern designer. I am. We'll talk about those in just a second. Let's talk about the distributor first. What is the distributor? What do they do? And why are they taking a big chunk from the pattern designer? Well, the distributor does a lot of things. The distributor has connections with all of the quilt shops. So distributors do a lot of marketing for the pattern designer, so they don't have to spend their time on that. A pattern designer can send in bulk to a distributor. So distributors are fantastic for doing big orders. So instead of sending 12, 24, 30 patterns to 20 different shops, I'm sending 500 patterns to a distributor, and then they're sending it out to the individual shops. Distributors are also great because they offer terms to shops. So for a lot of shops, they can order today and then pay in 30 days, which gives them a little more flexibility. If I, as a pattern designer, were to offer terms to all the shops, I'd also then have to manage all those dollars 30 days from now and figure out what's coming when, and doing that with a lot of shops is a lot of accounting work. So distributors make that less work. So they do a lot of marketing for us pattern designers. They make it easier for shops, and they make it easier for pattern designers. So we love having them as part of the equation, and we're not at all upset about giving them this piece of our quilt block, our pie. Now, I have these different versions of the distributor piece, and they're all different. They have the same colors, but the distributor, they're not getting all of this as profit because they have other things that are expenses, right? They have the inventory that they need to carry. They have payroll. So depending on the distributor and how they run their business, it might look different ways. So they'll have some profit, they'll have costs, they'll have payroll, they'll have inventory that they need to carry. They're also providing those terms to shops. So it's going to look a little more something like this. Now, the shops themselves, they don't get to keep it all as profit. I know we've given them this big chunk of this quilt block, but if quilt shops were to keep 50% of everything they sold as profit, we'd have a lot more quilt shops, and our quilt shops would be staying in business a lot longer. But the quilt shop equation might look a little like this. And I say might look because there's a lot going on with a quilt shop. Quilt shop has hopefully some profit. They're carrying inventory. These stripes could look very different depending on the shop. So they're carrying inventory. They have the cost of their brick and mortar business. They have employee costs, payroll. They have to keep the lights on, other expenses, their website, packaging, bags, displays, making samples. There are so many costs for a quilt shop and running a business that those costs are going to creep in. They're not getting this whole piece as their profit. There's a lot of costs that go in as a quilt shop, and so that is a little bit kind of what it might look like, and it's going to vary depending on the quilt shop what that'll really look like. And then here we have our quilt pattern designer piece. So now we're looking at this and saying, oh my gosh, well, I definitely want to be a quilt pattern designer if I'm going to be in this industry, or a notion designer if I'm going to be in this industry, because they're getting this huge chunk. And well, remember, as a designer, we have our costs, right? The cost of actually ordering the product, but we also have overhead as well. So it's a little more something like this, where we have us, and then we have our costs, and then we have our overhead. So as we chunk this all out, this might be the pattern designer's profit. Maybe if they are really successful, it could be a little bigger. If they are not selling as many, it might be even smaller. It can completely vary depending on the designer. This is our full quilt block of all the different parts of the industry and where all the dollars go. And I'm hoping that helps it make a little more sense of what's going on with all your quilty dollars. When a product is expensive, it's usually not because there's someone in the industry who's trying to make $1 million. Most people don't go into the quilting industry because we say, I'm gonna be a millionaire selling to all the quilters. That's a terrible song. Most of us are in this industry because we love it, because we have a passion for it, and we're hoping somewhere along the way we get to make that profitable and support our families and feed our families in it. Whether it's the quilt shops, the designers, the distributors, all of us are trying to create our portion of a living through all these things, and that happens with all these different pieces. And you might be asking yourself, okay, now that you've cut that down into so many small pieces, Carolina, how are people making their dollars? And that's a great question. So for the shop, if they're selling this pattern and they're only getting this piece, they're making their money because they hopefully are selling lots and lots of products. So they're selling lots and lots of different colors, different sizes, different shapes of blocks, and adding all of their little strips up from all those different blocks to make their profit. Same with the distributors. They carry thousands and thousands of products that they're selling into quilt shops, and in turning those products over and over, that's how they'll be making their products or their profits. And then for the pattern designer, hopefully they're able to figure out ways to kind of eke through this to make their piece bigger. But by selling into distributors and then selling into shops, yes, they're not getting this big, huge, all of it. But if you look at this piece, start adding those pieces up and it becomes the full pie. You add this over and over and over again, and by selling hundreds or hopefully even thousands of a pattern or a notion or whatever else they're making over time, that's how a pattern designer hopefully is able to make their living. And this is why, friends, it's so important for you to think about where you are spending your dollars to be able to support this industry. Yes, as a pattern designer, I absolutely love when you order from me directly. But also, I need my shops to stay in business. Most of my patterns are sold in independent quilt shops. Most of my patterns are not sold directly on my site. Most of my notions are sold in independent quilt shops. Most of my notions are not sold through my site. I do so much through the shops, and I love that for a couple different reasons. One, it actually is a lot less work for me. For me to try to reach as many customers as all the quilt shops do would be a lot of work, and I wouldn't be able to do that. But also, by doing that, I'm able to make a living as a designer, and I'm able to support the shops and help them make a living as well by providing them great notions and great patterns that they can sell to their customers, hopefully some of which are you. Quilt shops are the first line for so many things. For most quilters, if we have a question of, I can't get my machine to thread right, I'm having this problem, my blocks aren't turning out square, what's wrong with my seam allowance, I'm trying to put together a quilt, can someone help me pick the right fabric colors? There are so many of those kinds of questions that I, as a YouTuber or as a designer living all the way out here, would not be able to answer for you. But you walk into your local quilt shop and there is someone there who wants to help you with that, who's an expert at helping you with these things. That's what our quilt shops do. They are the front line in quilting and helping all of us become better quilters. As I was coming up as a quilter, the number of times I went to my local quilt shop for inspiration, for support, for help, for classes, just as a place to go and bring my quilt and say, look what I made. That was a really big deal. So we need our quilt shops to be successful. And they're not getting as big a piece of the pie, and neither are our designers as sometimes we might think they are. So next time you see the price of a product, maybe you'll understand a little bit where that came from, And hopefully this helps you understand the industry better. But if you have any more questions, let me know. Also, if you want to see more videos like this about like what's going on behind the scenes in the quilting industry and how that all works, let me know. Or if this was too much information and you don't want to see more of that, let me know as well, because I want to create content and create videos that help you in all parts of quilting, including where does my money go? Friends, make sure you've given this video a thumbs up, and if you're not subscribed, I have so many different kinds of videos here. Maybe I'll have more how the sausage is made in the quilting industry videos, we'll see, but I have lots of tutorials and product reviews and all kinds of other things to share with you. That was it for today. My friends, I will see you right here real soon. Bye for now.